Alright, looking at the tactical trigger P320 trigger kit. This will be install and overview. This will be the more detailed video. We have shorter ones to kind of get to the point and help you better understand what's going on. But first off, let's talk about the trigger kit itself. So here's three different variants of the 320, including the M17 and M18. So I've just got a few here to look at. There's obviously more variants, but so the first thing about the kits, let's go over some of the parts in the kits and what they do. So this is a modular kit. So there's a pre-travel stop, and that reduces the pre-travel compared to stock. So here, this gun's clear, and so we've got a shortened pre-travel in this gun based on the installation of the pre-travel stop. We've got a Sear engagement kit, which has Sear control springs. These are our patent pending Sear control springs that provide Sear engagement adjustment, or on the 320s, since these aren't extremely over engaged, you don't necessarily need to reduce the Sear engagement, but you can change the characteristics of how the trigger bar interfaces with the Sear, and eliminating a bounce of the Sear as the trigger bar first hits the Sear. So there, it minimizes the movement as you go to brake. So you get this really hard wall when using Sear control spring. And that there you see, that's just a tiny brake. And then it also shortens up the reset, but partially due because I have an overtravel stop installed, and the overtravel stop is based on springs as well. So there's three different overtravel stop springs that can be installed to reduce your overtravel. So this one, I believe, has an overtravel stop spring number 2 installed, and so that gives a nice short reset, and combined with that Sear control spring, that's a really short reset brake. So that's what that looks like there. The other things that can be done with these kits is adjusting the pull weight, and the pull weight can be adjusted by installing a reduced powered striker safety spring, which installs in the striker. And so here's a stock striker. The striker safety springs right there. That can be replaced with the reduced powered one, and that will drop the pull weight by up to a full pound sometimes. More realistically, probably about a half pound. One of the things to note about pull weight as well is that the different triggers here, and I've got 3 different triggers. These are all the SIG OEM triggers. So you got the curve trigger, which is in the standard models of the 320. It's in the M17 and M18 as well. And you could use a different trigger with this if you wanted. You could use the flat or the skeletonized flat that's like in this X5 here. This is an X compact that has just the flat trigger. So the difference in these triggers is the leverage point as it interfaces with the trigger bar, and so each one of them has a different pull weight range that can be achieved with them. So this curve trigger gives you a pull weight range of 4 to 5 pounds. The flat trigger gives a pull weight range of 3 to 4 pounds. And the skeletonized flat can give you 2.5 to 3.5 pounds. You could probably get it closer to 4 too, depending. So this one's more of the kind of the competition or the lighter pull style. Maybe some people might be comfortable with the different spring configurations. You could set it at like a 3-pound trigger, and maybe you'd be comfortable with that in a carry trigger. But anyway, that's kind of an overview of kind of your pull weight options. The one other part in this kit is an increased powered trigger spring, which sometimes the 320s can have a little bit of a mushy reset. So let's look at it here in this X5. So this is a clear gun as well. And so there's a really aggressive reset based on using that increased powered trigger spring. Okay, and so with different combinations of these parts, you can tune these guns how you'd like. So the most complicated part would be sear engagement adjustment, but so that would be you will adjust your sear engagement by looking at the sear engagement between, so you can look under the back plate here and you can view your sear engagement. So what you're doing is you're either tuning for one of two things. You're tuning for a slightly reduced sear engagement, that's something that is greater than 80%, or you're shooting for an adjustment of sear engagement that gives you the full intended sear engagement but nothing more. And so that's why, if you notice, I've got these magazines inserted, and the reason for that is that the magazine pushes up on the slide catch and will give, because there's a slide to frame tolerance here, that will allow me to view the sear engagement as intended. Because if I'm pushing down on this gun here, it's going to look like I've got full sear engagement, and I've got a kind of a performance tuning going on that's closer to the 80% sear engagement on this gun. And so if the slide is pushed all the way up, then I can view that sear engagement properly. So some of these different guns have different configurations. So this one has these all have the pre-travel stop installed. One of the things about the pre-travel stop is compatibility. So there's two older style trigger bars. We've got this one here is the one that is compatible with the manual safety, and this older style is marked 357. There's probably other markings too. The newest one that replaces both of these, this is the non-manual safety version, and this one's marked 675. So there might be other versions of these marked, but the only one that is compatible with the pre-travel stop is the one that's marked 576 in this region here. And the reason that it's not compatible is this little feature here is the part that interfaces with the striker safety lever and ultimately governs when the striker safety is defeated and stays engaged. So on the 576, this is slightly thinner, which allows for the striker safety to be engaged longer or further back in the pre-travel. So this one actually has in this M17 here, I actually have this same the trigger bar, this older style here, but I've actually modified it, which I do not recommend doing, because you would need the 576 trigger bar as a reference point to know how to properly modify this. And so you might as well buy the 576 if you're going to try to use that as a template for modification. So I would not recommend modifying them, but this one has been modified on the trigger bar. You can purchase, available with the kits are the OEM 576 trigger bar to allow for that compatibility with the reduced pre-travel. So if you use the pre-travel stop with one of these older style trigger bars, it will function correctly, but you will have some compromised margin of when the striker safety engages. So we do not recommend using the pre-travel stop with these older style trigger bars. So with that said, let's look at so we'll look at some of the performance of some of these kits with there's the M17. We showed you the X Compact. Okay, and then the X5. So this one's set up as a very light trigger. This one's actually about 2.5 pounds right now. Actually, maybe even a little lower based on the Sear spring configuration. So let's take one of these down and take a look at some of the configuration in here. So we'll go to this X Compact. So I will take out that. You move the takedown lever. If you've never taken one of these down before, you hold the slide back, rotate the takedown lever, then you can release the slide. The slide will come off. Then I can push on the back here. Sometimes these can be tight, but not always. So I'll push on the back and then I'll pull out from the front. And then that takedown lever will come out. Then I can pull up on the fire control module and then pull it out. So then that separates from the grip module. So you can see some of the installation of the parts of the kit here. I'll point out and we'll call out some of these parts as we move along. So obviously this is your trigger, and here's how the trigger engages with the trigger bar. So this part's the trigger bar. And notice on this one, it has the 576 marked newest single configuration trigger bar. Here is the trigger stop pin, and on the trigger stop pin is installed a overtravel stop spring. So that's one of the springs from the kit. Back here is the increased powered trigger spring. You know, and the stock looks the same. Here's your Sear housing here, and so also there is your Sear right there. There's your disconnector. And let's see, so then back here I've got my pre-travel stop installed in between the trigger bar and the Sear housing, and that wraps around. Then we've got the takedown safety bar over here, and that holds the Sear down when in the takedown configuration, and you can see here that takedown safety bar is being held by the slide catch. So this is the slide catch. And what else? Let's see. So one of the things is this the safety lever pin. It goes across here, so it's coming there. And this, on manual safety models, instead of this safety lever pin, you would see the manual safety. So the manual safety would go in place of that, and it would ride along there. So the pin would come in that side, and then the right half of the manual safety would go on the other side. So the Sear control spring. So let's start taking some of this down. So I'll take out the pre-travel stop. Okay, and then I'm going to take down the trigger bar. So the easy way to do this is you pull up on the trigger bar and then pull it out of the housing, and see how it's to the side of the housing there. And then what I can do is, now this trigger's in the right position, that I can just pull up on that trigger. Okay, and I just held down that trigger bar with my thumb. So the trigger just pulls right out to the side, and then I can rotate that trigger bar, relieving the spring tension. Okay, so that's kind of the easy way of doing that. So I'll set that trigger spring aside. Okay, so now I've got my trigger bar out. And the other thing that we can look at now is down in here, across this safety lever pin inside the Sear housing, I've got a Sear control spring over the top of that safety lever pin inside of the Sear housing. And so that is adjusting the ride height of the Sear. So if I release the takedown safety, now the Sear is able to move freely up and down. And so this Sear control spring is adjusting how high this Sear can ride in the upmost position. And so using the different number of springs, you can adjust that height to dial in the Sear engagement that you want for the type of configuration that you're running. So if you're running like a defensive or a carry trigger, you might want to do a full Sear engagement or only slightly reduced, something greater than the 80%. And so you can do that by installing either the number 3 or the number 2 spring for near full engagement. And if you want the slightly reduced engagement for more of a performance or a competition tuning, then you'd use the number 1 or the number 2. So this one actually has the number 2 installed right now, which was giving slightly reduced Sear engagement. Okay, so because we just kind of did the overview, I'll show you how to remove this and put this all back stock, and then we'll show a brand new installation a little bit later. So if I want to remove this Sear control spring, one thing is I like to use the takedown safety, and it's not in that configuration right now because I can see the slide catch is not holding that safety lever back. So I can go ahead and I'll grab a screwdriver here, and I'm going to push the safety lever back, and I'm going to hold the slide catch down a little bit, push that back, and then push the slide catch so it just caught. So now it's holding that back again, and it's holding the Sear down, and I can see that it's holding the Sear down now. And so I do that because it makes it easy to install and uninstall this the Sear control spring. So now I'm going to come to the safety lever pin. I'm going to push out the safety lever pin. Okay, and one other thing that I want to do is I'm going to push this is the Sear pin here. I guess I didn't mention this one. So that's what the Sear is riding on. If I take, and this is the safety lever here. So if I move the safety lever back, then I can see where that Sear pin is, and I can push this Sear pin, and the Sear pin will not move unless that takedown safety lever's back, and then it's going to hold the takedown safety lever as well back, or the takedown safety bar is actually what they call it. So I'm gonna push that Sear pin just flush, and that allows me to then move my my safety lever down, and you see how that dropped out, so I'll reinstall that. And so I just hold that orientation, install that like that. Okay, so it was installed. Then if I just flip that up, rotate it, pull it forward, then it will slide back out and out of there. Okay, and I like to show you guys the way to do this such that you're not taking everything down. So I like to keep it all together. So now I can remove my Sear control spring, and it looks like I needed a toothpick for this. So I'll try doing it without the toothpick for now. So I'm just going to take my screwdriver, and I'm not mangling this spring at all. I just rotated it so it popped out. Okay, and then I'm just going to grab that coil and drop it down. Okay, so this was a Sear control spring number 2 that was installed. Okay, so if I were just doing a replacement now, I could just grab one of the other springs and then go to reinstall that. So if I was swapping out springs. So to do that, I'd grab tweezers, and I would, so you want to be careful not to compress these too much. I like to wait till I get there to compress a little bit, but you'll need a little bit of compression. And so if you do that, compress that a bit, and so if you come in here, compress that a bit, and then just push down in with a tool of some kind. So I'm got it stuck on the top of the tweezers. So let's try that again. So I don't want any of the coils in the way. So, and you don't want to push down hard because you'll launch a spring. Okay, so I got it out of the way. Okay, I'm going to pull this to the side slightly. Okay, then I can just push down. Okay, and then it just dropped down in there. Okay, and then there's a hole in the Sear housing that you can kind of push this spring to the side a bit and get it seated back in that housing, because when you install the safety lever, okay, so now you can see this spring is seated to the side there, so it's not going to interfere with this safety lever when I put it back in. So I can put the safety lever back in, rotate it so it's not getting all bound up in the spring there. Okay, and then I can install my safety lever pin again, and so I can look to make sure that it's coming through the hole there, and I line that up. Okay, and then it pushed down. So now that's installed. Okay, And then, so that's how I'd do it if I was replacing a spring that was already installed. So I'm going to take that back out again, and I'm going to show you how to install it for the first time. So again, I'll take out this spring. Sometimes it's easier to use a toothpick than a screwdriver, but I forgot to grab a toothpick for this video, so I'm just using what I have. And looks like I'm getting that stuck on the side there. Normally it's a lot easier than this, especially if you have a toothpick. Uh-oh. Okay. Nope. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I got that spring out. So I'm going to put this all back to a stock configuration, and we'll come back and show how we might do that on a first install. Okay, so I got to line up this hole for the safety lever pin. Okay, so I got that back in, and then I'll push the Sear pin back in. See that? Okay. So there we go. Okay, this overtravel stop spring was installed there. On an initial install, you need to knock out this pin. So I like to use like a tape block. And a punch and a hammer, and just knock that out. And so on a new gun, you might need to knock that out a few times, back and forth, and so you can get that out easier. And especially later when you can swap out these Sear control springs by just pulling on it with pliers instead. So then you can leave the trigger and the trigger bar installed. So I'm going to put that back to the stock configuration, which does not have an overtravel stock spring installed. Okay, and move that out of the way. Okay, so then let's go ahead and install the trigger spring. So I'm just using this increased powered one for the purpose. It's the same process. So I like to, when you install these, put it on and then add the tension to the trigger or to the trigger spring by rotating the trigger bar into position, and then putting it back to the side of the housing like that, like I showed on that first one. Oops, I just dropped the takedown safety. Kind of got that stuck to the side there. So I get that on top of the safety lever. Okay, then I can put my trigger back in the side, and then I need this dent on the trigger to go into the trigger bar. So I push that down and I align the trigger bar. Okay, now it's into position. Now I can just kind of rotate the trigger and then push that back into the housing. So now that's back together. So that's the easy way to do it. Okay, so that's the stock configuration. Oh, my safety lever pin just fell out, which is okay. I just need to make sure it's seated on the safety lever again. Okay, so that's all together. The takedown safety lever was there. So now this is pretty much back to a stock configuration. I did leave the increased powered trigger spring in there for now. And so I'll show you if I've dropped the takedown lever, then this is a little bit harder. There's a notch here on the takedown, or if I drop the slide catch, which released the takedown safety, and see it's in that release position. Then if I go to put the takedown lever back in, I've got this notch that I need to line it up like that direction, push it in, rotate it a little bit, then push this all the way down to seat it, and then I can rotate it back to get the slide back on. Okay, so now I've got that back into a stock configuration. Okay, now I'll show you how I would install all these parts if this was the first time. This is a stock gun, how I would do this. So I'd lock this back, take it down like we talked about, take that down. I'm going to take out the slide or the takedown lever, pull the FCU. Okay, then I'm going to pull the trigger bar up and out of the housing, remove my trigger, and my safety lever pin just dropped, but that's okay. Okay, so remove the trigger bar, trigger spring by releasing that pressure on it. Okay, so that trigger spring or the safety lever pin dropped out. That's okay. I'll pull that out anyway because I was just going to go and install a Sear control spring. So notice on a first install, I can just go ahead and in this configuration, I can take my Sear control spring. And so I would start, if I'm going for a performance tuning, I'm going to start with a number 2 spring. So this is a number 2. And if I was going for a complete Sear engagement, then I might start with a number 3 instead. So with the performance tuning, so I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to leave the safety lever installed for this, and I'm just going to come into the side of it with the compressed spring and then push this down in. Oops. So I didn't get it. So notice it's a little bit harder. So you can take out the safety lever if you need to, and you do that by pushing that Sear pin in. Okay, so I'm going to try it this way. The reason why I do it this way is sometimes the number 1 spring, if you're doing a performance tuning. Okay, so now I got that down in there, but it's not seated all the way. I just need to push it the rest of the way down in. Okay, now it just slid down in there. And it went into the hole of the Sear housing, so that is the quick way to do it. It's ready to go, so I didn't need to remove the safety lever at all. And then I just look here to align the safety lever on this side. Okay, push that back in. So now I've got my Sear control spring seated in there, and that was the quicker way to do it without removing the safety lever. So on a first install, you might do it like that. Okay, then I'll come and I might have done my overtravel stop first. It really, the order isn't really critical, but sometimes it can be helpful to do this first. So I'm just grabbing this tape block, which is handy to do this, and I'm going to knock out my, I'll do it this direction so I can see it, knock out my takedown, or my trigger stop pin. So knock that out. Okay, and then pull that to the side. I'll install my overtravel stop spring. So overtravel is adjusted. If I want the absolute minimum overtravel, then I want to find which one gives me that maximum reduction. So I already know on this one I started with a number 1 and it didn't work, so I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to start with a number 1. I'm going to go to my pack and do a number 1. Because overtravel is the most common adjustment that you'd need to do, that you're for the tolerance of the unique gun. So I take the overtravel stop spring. I'm going to move that tape block now. Okay, and I put that over this pin as I start to push it back in. Okay. And I've got it a little bit down. Okay. There, now it's in the right orientation. I'm going to use pliers to align this. Okay. Push that back in and then seat that in. Okay, and so on a new gun you might need to knock that out and push it in a few times to get it seated right. So there I've got a number 1 installed. number 1 overtravel stop spring, and it's over the top of the trigger stop pin. Okay, now I'm ready to just proceed to install the trigger bar and the trigger again. So I'll take my increased power trigger spring, or you could use the stock spring, or whichever one you want for the configuration. So this is going to get, the increased powered one's going to give me a stronger reset. Okay, so I take my trigger bar again at a 90, and then I rotate that into configuration to compress the spring. I've got it up into the side of the housing, holding the trigger bar. Take the trigger, put that down in, and then align with that notch. And it's down in there. Now I can pull forward and push the trigger bar back into the housing. Okay, now it's seated correctly. Now I can go to install my pre-travel stop. So I take my pre-travel stop from my pre-travel pack, and I will install that. So there's a layered end here, and then there's this longer tab. The longer tab goes along the back, and the layered end goes inside the Sear housing, in between the trigger bar and the Sear housing. So to do this, I just pull the trigger bar slightly and then install that in there like that, and that's how it looks. And then this is completely retained once the grip module is installed. Okay, and you see, like, it doesn't interfere with the disconnector and that kind of stuff. It's all made to be retained and all function properly. Okay, so that will give me my reduced pre-travel now, and this is a complete installation. So now I can go back, and I'm in the my takedown safety is still back, so I might have bumped that at some point. Like, I'll just release it right now, and so now, you know, everything still functions the same, but that takedown lever is down. So you might need to push that that back, like we showed the first time, where I took my screwdriver and I pushed that back while holding down on the slide catch, and then get that so that I can install my Sear control springs and whatnot. But depending on the state, so I'm ready to reinstall. So I come here, put the fire control unit back into the grip module, take my takedown like we showed, put it in that orientation. And this is easier if that takedown safety bar was held back by the slide catch. So I needed to rotate that better. Okay, so now it's in position. Okay, and then put the takedown lever back to install the slide. Okay, and I had my guide rod out of whack since it wasn't letting me go all the way back. Okay, there. Now I can lock it back. Drop that. Okay, now I can look and inspect a few things to see how this is performing, and I can do my safety and reliability checks as well. And those are in the manual. First, I'm going to look at what's going on here. I'm going to function check the performance. So I've got the nice, light, smooth pre-travel into the wall. And so one thing is because of the slide buckling, you're going to get the best performance with the slide not buckling like that. So I like to install an empty mag. And so I'm not getting a break at the end. If I pulled up slightly on the slide, I could have gotten a break, but it's just almost not breaking. So that number 1 overtravel stop spring is the reason why that's not breaking correctly. So I'll go in there and I'll change that out. Okay, so while we're here, let's also look at Sear engagement to see where we are on the Sear engagement. So let's bring the camera down here. Okay, so you need a well-lit area, and I'm looking under the back plate here, and you can see the underneath that slide cap, you can see the Sear to the striker engagement. And on that one, see that line at the bottom, and then see the striker. So if you can hold this for me right like that, right where it is. Yep, hold that right there. Okay, if you look, so right here is what we're looking at. See the line right here along the bottom? That's the maximum engagement line that you can get off of the Sear to the striker engagement. So right in this configuration, it's at about an 80% Sear engagement right now, based on the Sear up here, to how much gap is there to the line. So for performance tuning, I wouldn't want to go any lower than that. So this is a number 2 Sear control spring. So I know that the number 1 will give me less engagement than I should have. So I wouldn't want to go with the number 1. If I wanted full Sear engagement, then I would go to a number 3 spring. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push the slide down into the frame, and you can see how now it's showing full Sear engagement. So that's why I'm using the magazine in there, and I'm pulling up to see what that Sear engagement really is. So if I'm trying to dial in for full Sear engagement, I want it to be just full with it all the way up, and then as I push down, it would be more than full, but that would be the goal. And so we'll adjust that too while we adjust the over travel here. So let's back out now. Okay, so I'm going to come back in on this gun, and I'm going to adjust for over travel, and I'm going to adjust the Sear engagement while I'm at it. Okay, so pull that fire control unit back down. Okay. And I'm going to need to remove the pre-travel stop, and I do that by pulling on the trigger slightly, pulling that to the side, remove the trigger bar again, and I'm going to do that so I can get to the Sear control spring. And to remove the Sear control spring, I'm going to do this slightly different now. I'm going to take my safety lever, pull that up, and I'm going to do what we showed the first time. So I need to make sure that my takedown safety bar is to the rear, and it is. And if it wasn't, if it was back, then I would need to push that back and then lock it forward to get it to the rear again. Okay, so it is there. Then I'm going to push my Sear pin in and only flush. I'm not going to remove it all the way. And then that allows me to remove, once I push out my safety lever pin, for the manual safety. If this was a manual safety model, the manual safety would just ride through there. Actually, I think it would go that direction. And then, so anyway, I will remove my the safety lever. Okay, and then come here, and then I can remove my Sear control spring. So, and again, this is easier if you use a toothpick than a screwdriver. A screwdriver works handy, so I want to be careful not to mangle that. So that was a number 2. I'm going to take my number 3 Sear control spring, and we're going to shoot for a full Sear engagement for a defensive tuning. Okay, and the Sear engagement, it also adjusts the travel from the wall to the brake. So in this configuration, I can go ahead and put this in easier than if I put the safety lever back. If I was doing a number 1 spring, I'd want the safety lever back in there, because sometimes that spring doesn't fit in as well, and it goes better if you do it with the safety lever in. Okay, so I push that into the Sear housing, and it's ready to install my safety lever again. So I push that back in. Okay, and then I will install the safety lever pin back through the hole, and I aligned the safety lever, so it's all in there good. Okay, now I can push my Sear pin back in and seat it. Okay, got that seated. Now I can go back and install my trigger bar. So we know that we wanted to change the over travel. So I could, if I didn't need to adjust my Sear control spring or change it out, then I could conveniently swap this out while I'm here. But I'm going to show you a different way, because we'll assume that I didn't need to change out my Sear control spring. So I install my trigger bar again using that method that we talked about, where we rotate the trigger bar, get it to the side of the housing. Okay, push that in, align. Okay, and that's back in the housing. So now I'm gonna not install my pre-travel stop for a second. I'm going to swap out my overtravel stop spring. So you can do that. So say I didn't need to change my Sear control spring, then I could just go right here to this. And since I've knocked that out a few times, I can just pull that out by hand. And then I can drop this spring, this overtravel stop spring. Pull that one out. Okay, so that was my number 1 overtravel stop spring. And I'm going to go to the number 2 instead. So I'm going to go to the number 2 in the pack. We'll try that one. And actually, I know that based on what that one was, that this number 2 is going to work, but it's going to have reduced not quite enough. So we're going to show you what that looks like. So we're working all the way down. I know that this one needs a number 3. So I'm going to install this. So it's a little bit harder to install in this with the trigger shoe on, but it's also easier and quicker than taking it down. So I got that over the pin. Then I can take that and then seat that again. Okay, so now I've got the number 2 in, and I can put my pre-travel stop back in, install that. Okay, and we won't do the full safety checks right now. We'll come back and do that when we get to a number 3 over travel stop spring, because I know that this particular gun needs to go down that far. So I can put my takedown safety, and notice this time the slide catch stayed locked back the whole time, or the takedown safety stayed back the whole time behind the slide catch. So this is going to make this reinstalling the takedown lever much easier. Okay, and then I rotate that back to the takedown position, install my slide. Okay, and then I'm going to check the function again. Okay, so pre-travel's short, light. Okay, the brake's nice and clean, so if I push this in there, I can look. So the brake's only slightly longer. Okay, the reset feels nice and good, and it's braking clean, but if I push down on the slide, it's not braking at the end. So I probably wouldn't want to run it in this configuration. I'd probably want to, because if I don't have a slide in there, it is braking. And so I could run it like this, but I would probably want to, especially for to make sure that I don't get any hesitation on a brake, I would want to probably still increase the overtravel. So I'll go to a number 3 overtravel stop spring instead. But let's look at, before we do that, let's look at what happened with Sear engagement by going to a number 3 spring. Okay, so let's see. All right. So now we can see, still a little dim, but maybe we can get it to brighten in there. All right. So now you can see that the Sear engagement is almost completely full. There's just a very slight gap. Probably, you know, it's more than 90%, but so very slightly reduced with the number 3 is all, but pretty close to full. And if I push down at all, it goes more than full, and that Sear starts to push down with the striker, which is how these are designed for modularity. So if I'm running it in this configuration, I'm going to get a much cleaner wall by eliminating that bounce that Sear can do as you come to the wall. Okay, so that's the a full Sear engagement configuration. Okay, so we're going to go back in here and we're going to replace the overtravel stop spring. So we know that number 2 was really close, but not quite there. So this time I'm going to leave pretravel. I'm going to leave everything installed. And I'm just only going to replace my overtravel stop spring. So that was a number 2 spring. And I'm going to go to, and I wouldn't want to lose these, so I'm just going to stop and put these back in. Okay, so I'll go to the number 3 spring. And the number 3 is the most overtravel, so I know that this one is the last one in the kit, so this should work correctly. And if for some reason the tolerances of the gun are such that you need more overtravel than what a number 3 will give you, then you can either run it without an overtravel stop spring, or you can contact us for additional options. Okay, I got that. I dropped that spring down in there, so now I need to push that back out. So this is one of the drawbacks of doing it this way, is you got to get it seated in there correctly. So it can be quicker, but if you do what I just did, it's not necessarily quicker. Okay, there, I got it over the stop spring, or the trigger stop pin correctly. Okay, so now it's in there. Check my pre-travel stop is in correct orientation. Now I can go back and install the grip module. Okay, and while I was in here too, one thing to note is this might be a good time to oil everything. So one place to oil is this connection between the trigger bar and that. I'll get a little bit of oil between the FCU and there. There are other spots are, I might want to put like a drop of oil on the Sear here to the firing pin, because you don't want to oil up in the striker channel. And we haven't gotten into the striker stuff yet, and so we'll do that in a second. But let's do safety check. So I dropped the striker here, and so I'm going to press down. This first safety check is I'm going to press down on the Sear, make sure it's returning, and so there's good pressure on that. Now I'm going to check, to make sure that safety lever is functioning correctly, so it's moving back. Okay, and so now I'm ready to reinstall my fire control module. So I need to get the trigger down in the grip module first. Okay. All right. Okay. The next step on safety checking is I'm going to check my striker safety. So I'm going to press that down and make sure that it blocks the striker without depressing. When I press it down, that it can move forward. And I'd also want to check for proper reset spring function. And the striker, so this one doesn't have a functioning striker reset spring in there. So notice how it's just dropping down. So I'd need to get that replaced, because that's not functioning correctly. So I will grab the striker and replace that with the correct one. I'll show you that in a second. So now my overtravel is good. The function of this trigger is excellent. So let's check. So I've got about just a little bit more than the 16th of pre-travel. and the same on the wall to brake, about a 1/16 inch, a nice short reset back on the wall. Okay, so that's all looks great. You know, we've checked the Sear engagement, and so we know that's at a full Sear engagement. Over travel's good, so now we can check finally that the striker safety is functioning correctly. So I'm going to press the sleeve of the striker down here, and I'm going to pull the trigger, and since my striker return spring's not functioning correctly, and I know I need to swap that out, I'm going to press the back of the striker here lightly with a tool, okay, while I'm holding that sleeve down. So this is a little bit challenging to do. And then I'm going to pull, and then I'm going to observe the travel distance until the striker safety is defeated. So there's about a 1/16 inch, and there it just defeated. Okay, so I know that I've got the appropriate margin there until the striker safety is defeated. Okay, and that would be the safety checks. So I'm going to pull the striker. One of the things that you're going to want to do is this is a polished striker, and only this surface here has been polished. There's two options with the kit. There's either a polishing kit or a polished striker. So I'm going to replace on this one, because it's got a bad striker reset spring. I'm going to replace the striker and with a good one. So I'm gonna go back to a stock. Here's a stock striker assembly, and I'm gonna use this one instead. And so I'm gonna need to recheck my Sear engagement and whatnot, because I'm using a different configuration with the gun now. So my options are I can either polish if I want the cleanest brake possible. So if you like a rolling brake, one that rolls from the wall through the brake, then I don't need to polish the striker. And all I would polish is just this surface right here. And so if I was gonna polish this, what I would do is I wouldn't even take anything down. I'd just grab a paper towel, wrap that around. I'd put the striker in this configuration with it all the way forward. I would grab my polishing kit, and I would put a thin layer of polish on my polishing wheel. Put this in my rotary tool, and then I would polish both directions. So I'd cover this up so I'm not getting polish everywhere, and clean this up. And I could take this all apart if I wanted to as well. And so I'd polish this direction, and I'd do that for a few seconds, replace the polish, and then I'd go this direction, okay, and I'd do that for a few seconds and replace the polish, then come back this direction, do that for a few seconds, and I probably do a total of 5 to 10 passes until I get a mere shine on this surface here. Okay, so sometimes it's easier to just do that, because I wanted to show you one with a bad striker return spring, because that's an important part for long-term reliability. And so I wanted to show you what the process is, and in case you do end up with a bad striker return spring or missing one. And so sometimes I don't recommend taking these apart, because you can mess up the striker reset spring. So I'm going to replace this with a polished one. So I'll grab my polished striker pin. Okay. I'm gonna pull this down, and then there's different versions of these cups. So I'm gonna pull up on the slide cup, or the striker cups, I believe is what they're called. God, this one's like wedged in there pretty good. There we go, got it. And that just dropped, so I'm gonna need to find that. Okay. then I can release the tension on that spring. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull the striker safety spring. I kept my finger there to not lose it. Okay, put that down. Okay, and then I'm going to just keep that striker safety compressed while I remove that. Okay. All right, so I found my striker cup. So now I'm ready to take my polished striker. So I've got a mirror shine on the striker surface, on the interfacing surface with the Sear. There's my stock one. Okay, then one thing to note is there is in here a striker reset spring. Okay, so this is a really small part that goes down in this channel here, interfaces with this portion of the striker pin. So I would want to inspect that to make sure that it's not all mangled, because on this one here, I know that it's all mangled up in there and it's destroyed, and you know, that can happen from not being installed correctly, debris, you know, lots of different things. So you're going to want to check to make sure that your striker reset spring is installed and functioning properly. So I'm going to take that, put that back into that channel. Okay, then I'm going to take my polished striker now and install that. And I'm going to feel to make sure that that striker reset spring is doing its job, and I can feel that it's in there correctly. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the spring. So I compress the spring down, I push that on the back, okay, and then if I pull this up slightly, then I get a notch here to where I can install these cups. Okay, put the two halves of the cup together, and there's a different style where it's the whole thing together. Okay, the spring's not over the top. Okay, now the spring's over the top, and that's all installed correctly. Now all I'm missing is my striker safety spring. So I've got the option of either doing the reduced powered one that comes with my kit, or I can use the stock one. The stock one's going to give me the heavier pull weight. The reduced powered one is going to give me a reduced powered or a lightened pull weight. So I'm going to come into my kit and I'm going to grab my reduced powered spring. Okay, and I'm going to save my stock one as an option for pull weight configuration later if I want. Okay, I'm going to install the lighter one. That's going to give me a smoother, lighter pre-travel. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to put the circle around the pin. Okay, so it's like that. And I kind of recommend doing this without tools. So just kind of put that there and then push this down and in. Okay, now it's installed. Okay, and then I can check its function when I put it back into the slide. So I'll come back here. I'll put this into the slide of this gun. Okay. Now I can check the function. I can press down on that, see that it's returning, so I know that that striker safety spring is installed correctly. Okay, then I can push, and I see that that striker reset spring is functioning correctly now. Okay, and then I can recheck everything, my Sear engagement and all that. So I've checked my Sear function, so I know that's good. So I'm going to come and I'm going to check my Sear engagement again now that I've got a different striker installed. Okay, come down here. Okay, and I can see that I've got full Sear engagement. Okay, and I'll pull up and on the slide just to verify. Yep, so I've got full Sear engagement there. Okay, and let's see. And so my overtravel is just slightly different. There's a little bit of a hesitancy right at the end, but that's going away as I fire it a few times. So pushing that slide down. That's number 3 spring. It's right on the edge, but it's breaking still clean. So I would be okay running that configuration because it's not ever going to give me an issue. And as the Sear and the striker all wear in a little bit more together, then that definitely will resolve completely. But there's only a slight hesitancy if I'm really compressing the slide to frame. So I think I'm okay with that configuration. And so the performance is nice and light. Okay, that looks good. So I'm just going to check my striker safety again now that I know. So with the reduced take up, that's what I'm looking for, is the point where this is defeated. So I pull the trigger, get that by, hold the striker sleeve all the way down in. Okay, and then I can push on the back of that. Okay, and then I can observe the travel distance. Okay, so there's the resting take up. Oops, I'm not pushing on the striker. So this can be a little bit challenging. There's about a 1/16 inch until it defeats. So I know that I've got good margin there, that my striker safety is functioning. So I know that I haven't defeated, and I know that I've got the correct trigger bar and everything, so I know that that's good now. And so that's the safety and reliability checks. So now some of the different configuration things that I could do. I can check the pull weight on this. I know I've checked this. So the lightest pull weight is going to be with the stock trigger spring and the reduced powered striker safety spring. That's going to, for this one, that could get me down to about 3 pounds. If that's too light for me, then I can run the increased power trigger spring. That might put me up to 3.25 to 3.5 pounds. And then if I wanted it a little bit heavier, I could go back to the stock striker safety spring. I like how this is pulling right now. This is about a 3.5 pound trigger with the increased powered trigger spring, and all that's kind of relative to the gun. So you kind of check that out and decide on the configuration that you want to run. Some of the different configurations here. So this gun here for a performance tuning needed a number 1 Sear control spring. This one for performance tuning is a number 2 Sear control spring. For a full Sear engagement, this one's a number 2 Sear control spring. For full Sear engagement, this one's a number 3. This one's a number 3 for a full Sear engagement, a number 2 for a performance tuning, and number 1 is less than 80% engagement, so I wouldn't want to use the number 1. I can retain all my Sear control springs in case I change out parts, like a Sear or a striker, that would affect that. My overtravel is affected by either the Sear, the striker, or the trigger bar, or the trigger shoe, or the trigger itself. So I can retain my overtravel stop springs for in case I change anything out there. So that gives you a pretty good idea of all the different things that you can do with the kit. There is shortened videos available to kind of streamline what you're looking at on the install process and whatnot. Here we tried to give you more insight into the different aspects of this. I'm sure there's stuff that we're missing. We will have additional videos on individual portions of the kit, since all this is modular. So we'll focus in on, if you want to better understand the Sear engagement adjustment process, swapping Sear control springs, we'll focus in on that. We'll focus in on just the overtravel adjustment portion and the pull weight adjustment portion, pre-travel, and then striker polishing and whatnot as well. And so that's the more detailed video. Thanks for watching, and these are available for purchase at tacticaltriggers.com.